Auditor General Karen Hogan has delivered her latest reports. They're focused on 3 areas, including First Nations housing and First Nations policing. At a briefing, Hogan said the federal government has failed to heed multiple warnings over the years.
Time after time, whether in housing, policing, safe drinking water, or other critical areas, our audits of federal programs to support Canada's Indigenous peoples reveals a distressing and persistent pattern of failure. The lack of progress clearly demonstrates that the government's passive, siloed approach is ineffective, and in fact contradicts the spirit of true reconciliation.
The CBC's Karina Roman has been looking at the reports, and she joins me now live from Ottawa. So Karina, tell us more about the key findings.
So in terms of the Indigenous, the First Nation housing, failing grade for the federal government, as you heard there, the Auditor General saying that there's been repeated warnings, 20 years with a few reports, and there's been little progress made. She looked at numbers even just between 2015 and now, which is 2015 when the Liberals came into power, and the numbers in terms of the houses that still need to be built or need to be repaired has basically stayed unchanged despite investment of billions of dollars. And of course, this matters because as the Auditor General says, housing is a right, a basic human right, and there's this vicious cycle happening with poor housing leading to poor health outcomes and poor life outcomes, and then it goes on and perpetuates that cycle. And so Hogan basically saying that the federal government needs to not just talk about what they're going to do and say that it matters to them and say that's important and even promise money, but that something fundamentally has to change. Have a listen.
I can just imagine this situation in a First Nations community where, you want to put your child to bed and you can't go to the tap and get a glass of water, a safe glass of water, and then you put them to sleep in their bed in a room that has mold in the walls. That is completely unacceptable.
She also says that the strategy that they have to bridge the gap between what is there now and what needs to be done, and that gap is about $44 billion of investment, is that it doesn't actually explain. So there's this strategy with no explanation of how they're going to get from A to B. You also have the CMHC deciding a funding formula based on 2001 census data. So you've got some provinces overfunded and some underfunded. And you have no assurance of building code adherence. So she said that obviously is a big problem as well. And a mole strategy from 2008 has basically been completely ignored. So her words are that she is completely discouraged on this front. And that is quite a sad statement if you think about it, that there doesn't seem to be a lot of optimism that things are going to turn around, even though she's, of course, made recommendations to the government on how to turn things around.
Need to work faster, and that we need to be making ambitious investments like the ones we've already made, but I would argue more, and that we need to be working with partners to make sure that we have the creative solutions to closing that gap. There are other barriers in the way, but I think with a goal of closing the infrastructure gap, in particular on housing by 2030, it does sharpen the mind of all partners, and I think it's important to have those goals.
Now, Patty Hajdu said that the 2030 goal, she was asked, can it be reached to bridge that gap? The Auditor General doesn't think that it can, but Hajdu saying that goal is important to focus the mind. But that's very similar language to what we heard from her in terms of the water, clean water deadline that also the federal government didn't meet. So it might focus the mind, but it still might be unattainable.
And so what about the other 2 reports the AG presented to the House today?
So there's the policing report, which basically found two things: that public safety is not managing this file well at all, that there's millions of dollars being pledged and budgeted but not spent, that the RCMP is understaffing where they're supposed to have officers and they don't have dedicated officers. We did hear from the minister in charge, Dominic LeBlanc, saying that, well, there's a cost-sharing agreement with the provinces, but also acknowledging that that's not enough of an explanation, that even if the provinces are failing, that doesn't allow the federal government to excuse its failure to staff things and to fund things properly. And then there was a report on the National Trade Corridors Fund, which is actually well designed, according to the Auditor General, and well implemented, except it's not measured. So we don't know whether it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is easing up bottlenecks and making transportation across Canada for goods and services more efficient and better, considering how much of our economy is based on trade. So the minister, of course, promising to do that better going forward.
Karina, thank you. The CBC's Karina Roman, live in Ottawa.